Bit of a dangerous topic to tackle on YouTube in any sort of serious way, at least, since we saw what happened to past videos where suicide was seriously discussed without the cliche of it's all going to be okay if you just keep on persevering. No matter the anguish, just hold on and we guarantee it'll work out in the end. Sort of cliché-isms. So yeah, I mean, any YouTube video on suicide that I've seen which did not follow that little nursery formula of advice has so far been wiped out. So it's probably not a good idea for me to do this video, but by this point I don't really care much about having this account wiped out by YouTube since it's not going anywhere anyway. So yeah, might as well talk about it, because I've had a bit of a weird shake-up when it comes to my stance on suicide, and I guess since I never specified my stance in the first place, I guess I'll do that now. But I'm sure it's no surprise to anyone that I believe that once a person turns 18, or, you know, whatever, late teens, early 20s age, you want to ballpark it in, doesn't really matter. But sometime around that time frame of passage into adulthood, I believe that if we're going to call ourselves civilized, we should present every young adult with a contract which they should be obligated to sign, where they would simply answer yes or no to the question of do you wish to have the right to, at any point somewhere down the road, choose to end your life through a completely non-painful method with the aid of the medical industrial complex. That's the question, basically. Probably can be phrased a hell of a lot better than that, but I'm just going off the whim here, so it doesn't really matter. Use your imagination. And it would just be a yes or no answer. And I guess those who refuse to provide the answer would simply run the risk of having a family member make that decision for them. And, you know, a decision that they may regret once it's too late, but that's just the way it would have to be. I don't believe that a suicidal person has to live in some sort of an extremely unbearable condition in order to... I don't believe it should be a prerequisite to exercising that option of suicide. The option should be available to any adult who feels that that's what it's come to. Now, obviously, if they have young children or some other obligation to society they're required by law to fulfill, then that option of suicide will be placed on hold. But once that's done, it should be fair game. A human being should not have to be in some sort of a vegetative state in order to warrant a justifiable excuse to end their own life as they see fit. It's just one of those circumstances where the judgment call has to be made by the individual, because there's no right or wrong judgment call that the profession of psychiatric babble can make that's going to do any more justice to how the suicidal person feels than the suicidal person's own judgment can do. Now, I think we can safely say that the individual is going to know a little better how bad he or she has it than those analyzing the individual based on these dogmatic notions of this happy and sad scale that's based on nothing but the majority happy and sad scale. So if it's seen as inappropriate or out of the ordinary for the average human being to feel suicidal over something as trivial as having to take antidepressants every now and then or something, that standard of what's atypical, based strictly on a numbers game, will just continue being imposed unless some changes are made. And the only change that can solve this dilemma is simply allowing the individual to decide when they've had enough. But of course that presents a dilemma of its own, because in most people's eyes there exists this objective, normal, abnormal line of what makes a healthy psychology. And the very same kind of healthy psychology that's viewed as necessary to make a rational decision when it comes to something like this. And of course, so far the only psychologies that have been identified as healthy and stable enough to make that decision of suicide are those that will always see the prospect of fighting through the pain as a worthy enough endeavor. And anyone who comes to the conclusion that the bullshit of life is just not worth it is branded as having an unfit psychology to make this kind of a decision for themselves. I mean, go figure. And it's so tedious that the authority of these people doing this branding of psychology just continues to go unquestioned. Because as long as a human being has no obligations to fulfill, if firmly comfortable with ending their own life, they should not have to put up with being evaluated for weeks or months in some sort of a confined institution reserved for nut jobs. Because if you're going to go so far as to confine them, you really should have to logically demonstrate how this line of life becoming too burdensome is anything but arbitrary. And I say that because most people have actually drawn a line. Most civilized people agree that those in a vegetative state should have a right to euthanasia nowadays. So there's a line here. And we just need to get a grip on that, because it's apparent just how poorly drawn this supposedly objectively defined line is. And most people still see it as, you know, meritorious, even though it's based on a majority standard. So you counter up all this, and there's just no way to justify people who merely ask for an easy way out being kept in white coats. And you know, they'll dress up this confinement as help, but these people aren't being given any kind of real help, because the objective should be to end the damn pain. And you're not going to end the damn pain by brainwashing someone with standard psycho drivel about the light at the end of the tunnel. Because there's no way to guarantee the light at the end of the tunnel. Unless you're some sort of a magical fortune teller type psychiatrist, you're just not going to be able to do that. So that's where I've always stood. And it's where I still stand to this very day. But last week, something very strange happened. A person I've known for a very long time, a pretty good friend, told me he's been suicidal. And you know, said if presented with the option to go through with it through a non-painful manner, he would take it just like that. And you know, this is not some unstable person. This is simply someone who has been depressed for a very long time, all his life basically, and has realized by this point that his depression is simply rooted in his system, and time isn't going to make it go away magically. If anything, more time you know, one spends in chronic depression, the harder it's going to get. And he's fully aware of this too. And as a result, his chronophobia has gotten pretty severe as well. But the point I'm driving to is, despite all the arguments I've made throughout my life, defending this line, bullshit line, this of, you know, suicide, last week when I was actually for the first time in my life confronted by someone that I know very well who is in this rut, I didn't argue any of this. I pretty much gave him the by the numbers pep talk, the very same pep talk that I have the utmost contempt for. And I did it because I didn't want him to be, you know, do something. And it was just one of those moments I'll never forget, because for the first time in my life, I didn't do what the principle called for. I did the easy thing instead. Because I was more comfortable with the idea of him being blissfully ignorant than I was concerned with what was ultimately best for him. Because he didn't need to hear some generic tripe about persevering, because it's not a practical solution to his circumstance. And I damn well know it. But knowing it wasn't enough, apparently. And I remember my intelligence was screaming at me to quit lying to the guy, about people who have it worse than him and all this junk. And even that wasn't enough as it was happening. And the thing is, with me, the principle of intellectual truth, as I see it, always comes first. And I'm not trying to toot my own horn with that statement. I'm just extremely perplexed at what happened, and disappointed in the fact that, I still to this day haven't told him my true stance on suicide, just out of my own selfishness, for fear of it triggering something in his head. And I always give people shit for sweeping the truth under the rug. And here I was, in violation of my own damn code, sweeping it under the rug to preserve a friendship that I knew damn well isn't worth the price of his, what he has to endure. So I'm just at this point where I keep wanting to call bullshit on what some theist or some spiritualist says on here, but I keep nagging myself in the back of my head asking, well, how can I expect people to put truth first when it's become clear that even I can't do it all the time? And this was one hell of an important time to do it, and I bailed on the truth for no reason other than comfort. I guess the only difference, unlike most people, I'm fully aware that I bailed on the truth, and obviously I have no qualms admitting it, but is that enough? I don't think so. I mean, I still did the easy thing, and I can rectify it any damn time I wish. I just call the guy and let him know what I think of his circumstance and what I'd do if I were in his shoes, but there's no way